She was left to freeze by her in-laws. Then a rancher stopped his horse. The wind on Kestrel Ridge did not scream like a monster. It did something worse. It whispered, steady and patient, as if it had all the time in the universe to finish its work. Lyra Kesserin moved through white emptiness with her head down and her arms wrapped tight around her body. Snow climbed over her boots and tried to pull them off with every step. The cold slipped under her collar and into her bones, not sharp at first, but deep. The kind of cold that did not threaten, the kind that promised. She had grown up on a warm station with gentle gravity and clean air. The cold there was a choice, a room you stepped into for training or science. Here the cold was law. Her breath came out thin and pale. It vanished before she could even watch it. Behind her, far across the open plain, the last lights of the convoy were gone. No engine sound, no glow, no sign that anyone had ever been there. That was what made it real. They had not pushed her. They had not shouted. They had not needed to. They had simply arranged things so she would be alone in the storm, as if loneliness were a polite decision. It had started with a quiet message, a formal summons, a dinner that felt like a court hearing. Her husband's family sat in a ring of smooth chairs that matched their smooth faces. Their house on the orbital ring was elegant, warm, and bright. They served food that tasted perfect and meant nothing. They spoke in careful phrases with the calm of people who believed they were never wrong. Lyra remembered her mother-in-law's voice most of all, soft, almost kind. "This union has reached its natural end," she had said, as if the marriage were a tool that had worn down. "You will be returned to suitable human guardianship." Lyra had tried to keep her voice steady. "I have guardianship. I'm a citizen of the conquered. I can travel on my own." A small silence had followed, the kind of silence that said her words were not important enough to answer. Then her father-in-law had looked at her, and his eyes had been like clear stones. "Of course," he said, "you may travel." He did not say where, he did not say how. That night her husband did not come to see her. That hurt more than she wanted to admit. He had been distant for months, as if he were turning into a stranger one careful step at a time. In public, he had smiled beside her. In private, he had looked past her like she was a window and not a person. When the escort arrived, they treated her gently. They carried her bags, they opened doors, they gave her a cloak meant for cold climates a little too light and boots a little too thin. They smiled the entire time. Lyra had asked where they were taking her. "To a transit point," one guard had said. The word transit had sounded safe. It had sounded official. They flew her down to the planet's surface in a small shuttle that shook with wind and ice. When the shuttle landed, Lyra stepped out and felt the cold bite her face. The air was dry and sharp. The sky was a solid gray, like a lid pressed down tight. A human station sat nearby, low and sturdy. A rough-built thing made for survival, not beauty. She had felt a flicker of relief. But the shuttle did not stop there. It moved again, skimming over snow fields and dark rock. Far below, lines of fencing cut across the land like thin scratches. A river, half frozen, curved through a valley. In the distance, she saw scattered lights, small homes, not a city. People who lived far apart on purpose or by need. The shuttle landed again, this time beside an empty marker tower and a small supply shed. There was no station, no staff, no welcoming lights. The escort opened the door and helped her down. The wind hit her like a wall. Lyra turned to the guard, blinking hard. "This isn't a transit point." The guard's smile did not change. "There is a road line 2 kilometers east, a ranch route. Humans travel it." 2 kilometers? Lyra looked into the white distance. She could barely see 10 meters. "You have the cloak," the guard said, as if that solved everything. Lyra's mouth went dry. "The storm," the guard lowered his voice, still polite. "You are free to go where you wish, Lady Kesserin." Lady, like a joke, like a costume. Then he stepped back into the shuttle. The hatch closed, the engines rose in pitch. Lyra ran forward, suddenly desperate. "Wait, at least take me to the road." The shuttle lifted. Snow and ice blasted outward. The world turned into spinning white. Lyra threw an arm over her face, coughing, and when she looked again, the shuttle was already a shrinking dot. Then it was gone. Now, hours later, she trudged through the storm with no clear direction, only the vague memory of East and the weaker promise that humans traveled these lands. Humans. She had met humans in the conquered councils and trade halls. She had heard them argue, laugh, negotiate, and complain about coffee. She had thought she understood them, but she had never met humans who lived like this. Her cloak flapped against her legs. It was lined, yes, but not enough. Her hands were numb even inside her gloves. The gloves were not made for this cold. She could feel the air finding the seams. She told herself to keep moving. Movement made heat. Heat meant time. Time meant a chance. Her thoughts tried to slide away from her like objects on ice. She forced them back. Step. Breathe. Step. A darker shape appeared ahead, low and long. At first she thought it was a ridge. Then she saw fence posts half buried and a wire line cutting across. She reached it and leaned her weight against a post, panting. The post was wood, rough under her glove, real wood. She had not touched real wood since childhood. She looked along the fence line. It vanished into the storm in both directions. A human fence. That meant someone lived nearby, or had lived nearby. Hope warmed her chest for a moment, then faded as quickly as it came. She could not see lights, could not hear engines, could not hear voices, only the wind. She kept walking, one hand brushing the fence as if it were a guide rope in the dark. The wire hummed softly under the storm, a strange, thin sound. She imagined it as a note held too long. Time stretched, her legs felt heavy. Her feet began to lose sensation. That scared her more than pain would have. Pain was information, numbness was silence. She tried to remember the last kind thing anyone in that house had said to her. She found nothing solid, only smiles. Only smooth words, only the quiet feeling of being managed. Her in-laws had not hated her. Hate would have been warmer. They had simply decided she was no longer useful. That thought made her chest tighten. Lyra stopped and swallowed hard. She would not cry. Tears would freeze. She would not waste water. She would not waste heat. She lifted her head, squinting into the white, and then she saw it. A dark shape moved through the storm, taller than the fence posts. At first her mind refused to label it. A person, a machine, a creature. It came closer and the shape became clearer. 4 legs, a broad body, a head held low against the wind. A horse. Lyra had seen horses in old Earth videos, in museums, in children's books. She had never seen one in real life. The animal looked unreal out here, like something that belonged to another world. On its back sat a human, hunched in a thick coat, face hidden behind scarf and goggles. He rode with calm control, as if the storm were just weather, not danger. The horse slowed near the fence line. The rider turned his head slightly, scanning. Lyra's heart jumped. She tried to shout, but her throat was dry and the wind stole the sound. She waved both arms. The rider's head snapped toward her. For a second he stayed still. Then he clicked his tongue softly, guiding the horse closer. The animal stepped carefully, placing its hooves with steady judgment. Snow swirled around its legs, but it did not panic. The rider stopped a few meters away and held up a gloved hand, palm out. Not a threat. A pause. "Hey," he called, voice loud enough to cut through the wind. "Don't move too fast. You all right?" Lyra tried to answer. Her lips felt stiff. I'm... The words broke apart. The rider leaned forward, studying her. "You're not dressed for this." He swung down from the saddle in one smooth motion. Even that small movement was careful, practiced. He came closer, boots crunching. Up close, she could see he was taller than her by a head, broad-shouldered with snow crusted on his coat. A long scarf covered most of his face, but she saw the shape of a jaw, a nose reddened by cold, and eyes that were sharp and worried behind clear lenses. He glanced at her hands, her boots, her cloak. He did the quick math without saying it. "Where's your ride?" he asked. Lyra stared at him, her thoughts felt slow. They left. The human's shoulders tightened, not anger exactly, something heavier, like disappointment mixed with purpose. "Name?" he asked, short and practical. "Lyra," she forced the word out. "Lyra Kesserin." He nodded as if names mattered, as if she mattered. "Elias Holt. You can call me Eli if you want." He looked past her into the storm. "How long you been out here?" Lyra hesitated. Time was slippery. I don't know, hours." Elias swore under his breath, not loud, more like a frustrated exhale. "Okay." He stepped closer. "You're coming with me now." Lyra blinked. I don't want to." "Listen," he said, voice firm but not cruel. "This storm gets worse after sundown. You stay out here, you'll pass out, and then you won't wake up. That's not drama, that's just how it works." Lyra's stomach turned. The words were blunt, but there was no pleasure in them, only fact. Elias glanced at the horse, then at her again. "Can you climb? Can you hold on?" I think so." He moved to her side and put a steady hand near her elbow without grabbing. He waited, giving her the choice to accept. Lyra took a breath and nodded. "All right." Elias turned and led her to the horse. The animal stood patient and solid, steam rising faintly from its nostrils. Elias spoke to the horse in a low voice. "Easy, Marigold, easy." Marigold flicked an ear, calm. Elias pulled a folded blanket from behind the saddle and wrapped it around Lyra's shoulders over her cloak. The blanket was thick, worn, and warm in a way her sleek clothing had never been. "Put your hands inside," he instructed, tucking the edges around her like she was fragile cargo. No one had treated her like something worth protecting in a long time. Elias adjusted the saddle straps, then looked at her boots. "Your feet numb?" "Yes," Lyra admitted. Elias nodded once. "Okay, don't fight it, just focus on balance." He guided her to the stirrup and helped lift her. It was not rough, it was not embarrassing. It was simply necessary. Lyra ended up seated in front of him, the horse's warmth rising through the saddle. She held the blanket tight and tried not to shake. Elias climbed up behind her. He wrapped one arm around her waist, not possessive, just stable, and took the reins with the other. "Hold the saddle horn," he said, "and lean back if you get dizzy." Lyra's fingers found the horn. Her grip was clumsy, but she managed. Elias clicked his tongue again, and Marigold began to move. They followed the fence line, the horse choosing the path like it had a map in its bones. Lyra watched the white blur of the storm and felt fear loosen its grip slightly. Not because the storm was weaker, but because someone was with her now. Elias shifted behind her, keeping his weight steady. "You said they left you? Who they?" Lyra hesitated. She was trained to speak carefully. Her entire life had been careful. "My husband's family," she said. Elias' arm tightened for half a second. "Your in-laws." "Yes," he let out a slow breath. "That's something." Lyra tried to laugh, but it came out as a small, broken sound. Elias did not press her. Instead, he said, "You got anywhere to go?" "Any station ID, comm tag, anything?" Lyra shook her head. "They took my comm unit at the house, said it needed security updates. They never returned it." Elias muttered another quiet word. "Of course." The horse moved steadily. The fence posts became rhythm, dark post, white space, dark post, white space. Lyra's eyelids felt heavy. She blinked hard to keep them open. Elias noticed. "Hey, stay with me, all right? Talk to me, tell me something, anything." Lyra swallowed. Her tongue felt thick. Why are you out here?" Elias gave a short sound that might have been a laugh. "Checking the fence. Storms like this knock things loose. If a section goes down, the herd wanders. Then you spend 3 days finding them and you'll wish you were back fixing the fence." "Herd," Lyra repeated. "Longhorns," he said. "Big animals, stubborn like rocks with legs." Lyra tried to picture it, but her mind slid away. Still, the word herd made this world feel less empty. Elias continued, as if the sound of his own voice was a rope he was throwing to keep her from drifting. "This area's mostly ranches. People spread out. We look out for each other because if we don't, nobody else will." Lyra stared ahead. "You look out for strangers too." Elias hesitated. For the first time, his voice softened. "Depends on the day, depends on the stranger, but if I see someone freezing next to my fence, yeah, that's not a maybe. That's a get off your horse and help." Lyra's throat tightened again, but this time it wasn't only cold. "You don't know who I am?" "I know what I saw," Elias said. "I saw a person in trouble." They rode on. After what felt like both minutes and years, a shape emerged from the storm. A low building with a slanted roof and dark walls. A windbreak of stacked boards and snow fencing. A set of lights that glowed warm and steady like small suns. Lyra's chest lifted. She had not realized how badly she needed to see light until she saw it. Elias guided Marigold toward the structure. As they got closer, Lyra heard the dull hum of power generators and the faint barking of a dog inside, the sound of life. Elias called out, voice rising, "Mara, I'm back." A door opened and warm light spilled out, cutting through the storm. A woman stood in the doorway, bundled in a heavy coat. Behind her, a child peeked out, eyes wide. "What took you so?" the woman began, then stopped as she saw Lyra. Elias dismounted first, then helped Lyra down, keeping the blanket around her shoulders. "Found her by the north fence," he said, quick and clear. "She's cold, need heat and tea, maybe a med scan." The woman's face changed in an instant. Surprise became concern, and concern became action. "Inside," she said, stepping back. "Now." Lyra tried to walk, but her legs wobbled. Elias stayed close without crowding her, ready to catch her if she fell. The woman moved to her other side. Together, they guided her into the house. The warmth hit Lyra like a wave. It made her dizzy. Her body reacted as if it had forgotten what warmth felt like. The door shut behind them, muffling the storm. The outside world became a distant howl, like a bad dream kept safely behind a wall. Lyra stood there, swaying, surrounded by strangers who looked at her like she was real, like she was not a mistake to be cleaned up. Elias pulled down his scarf and goggles. His face was weathered and young at the same time, the kind of face that had seen hard seasons and kept going anyway. "This is my wife, Mara," he said, nodding toward the woman. "And that's Jace." He tilted his head toward the child. "He's curious about everything, so if he stares, don't take it personal." Jace stared harder as if challenged. Mara stepped closer, voice gentle. "Hi, I'm Mara, you're safe here." Safe. The word landed in Lyra's chest with quiet weight. She had not realized how long it had been since she believed it. Her knees buckled. She did not fall. Elias and Mara caught her at the same time, steady hands, practiced teamwork. "Easy," Elias said. "Got you." Mara guided her toward a chair near a heater that glowed orange. A dog trotted up, sniffed Lyra's boots, then sneezed and wagged its tail like it had decided she was not dangerous. Mara pressed a warm mug into Lyra's hands. "Drink, small sips." Lyra lifted it to her lips. The liquid was sweet and hot. It burned just enough to prove she was alive. Elias crouched beside her. "What happened out there, Lyra?" Lyra looked at the mug, at the steam rising from it like a new kind of breath. Her mind tried to protect itself by going blank, but she forced herself to speak because these people deserved honesty. "They left me," she said simply. "My husband's family, they said I was free to go where I wished. Then they flew away." Mara's mouth tightened. Not anger like fire, anger like stone. Elias' eyes held steady on Lyra's face. "All right," he said, calm and certain. "Then you're not going back out in that storm, not tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out calls and IDs and all that. For now, you warm up." Lyra's hands trembled around the mug. She swallowed again. Her voice came out thin but clear. "Why?" she asked. "Why help me?" Elias looked at her as if the answer was the most obvious thing in the world. "Because you were there," he said, "and you're human enough for me." Lyra blinked. The words didn't mean what they would have meant in a council hall. They meant something simpler, something bigger. Outside, the storm pressed against the walls, still patient, still whispering. Inside, the ranch house held its warmth like a promise that did not need contracts. Morning came quietly to the Holt Ranch. The storm had not ended, but it had softened. The wind no longer howled like it wanted to tear the world apart. It moved in slow, steady waves, brushing snow across the windows like careful fingers. Lyra woke in a small room that smelled faintly of clean cloth and warm air. For a moment, she did not remember where she was. The ceiling above her was made of wood, not metal. A thin beam ran across it, slightly crooked, like it had been placed by hand instead of a machine. She blinked and turned her head. A heater sat near the wall, glowing softly. A thick blanket covered her up to her chin. Her boots and cloak were placed neatly by the door, drying. A small table held a cup of water and a simple meal wrapped in cloth. She was not alone in a transit station. She was in a home. The memory of the storm came back in pieces. The fence, the horse, Elias' voice cutting through the wind, the warm light of the doorway. Her chest tightened, but this time it was not fear. It was something closer to relief, though it still felt strange and heavy inside her. Lyra sat up slowly. Her body felt sore, like she had run a long distance without knowing it. Her fingers tingled as warmth moved back into them, a soft, uncomfortable reminder that she was still alive. She swung her legs over the side of the bed. The floor was cool but not cold. She stood carefully, testing her balance. Her legs held. Outside the room, she heard soft sounds. A pan clinked. A voice hummed low and off-key. A child laughed, the sound of normal life. She followed it. The main room of the house was simple and open. A large table sat in the center, marked with scratches and stains from years of use. One wall held shelves filled with tools, books, and small, strange objects that looked like parts from broken machines. A window faced the snow fields, though the view was mostly white. Mara stood near the cooking surface, turning something in a pan. Jace sat at the table, drawing on a piece of old paper with a stubby pencil. The dog lay near the heater, watching everything with slow, sleepy eyes. Elias leaned against the counter, drinking from a mug. They all looked up when Lyra stepped in. Mara smiled first. "Good morning, how are you feeling?" Lyra opened her mouth, then closed it. She had been trained to answer questions with polite, careful words. This felt different. "I'm warm," she said. Elias nodded. "That's a good start." Jace stared at her openly. "You're tall," he said. Lyra blinked, then she let out a small laugh, surprised by the sound of it. "I suppose I am." Mara slid a plate onto the table. "Sit, eat. We can talk after you've got some food in you." The food was simple. flat bread, a thick soup with vegetables and something that tasted like meat and a cup of hot tea. It was not arranged to look perfect. It was not served by quiet machines. It was handed to her by a person who looked her in the eye. Lyra took a careful bite. The taste was strong and real. It filled her mouth and traveled down into her stomach like a small fire. She realized how hungry she had been. As she ate, the Holts did not rush her. They spoke to each other about small things, a fence post that needed fixing, a neighbor who might stop by later, a supply run that would have to wait until the storm fully passed. Lyra listened. Their words were not important in the way council talks were important. They did not decide the fate of systems or trade routes. But they decided what their day would be like, who would do what, who needed help. It felt strange but comforting. After she finished, Elias cleared the plates. "All right," he said. "Let's talk a bit." Lyra stiffened without meaning to. Talking usually meant explaining. Explaining usually meant defending herself. Mara noticed. "You don't have to share anything you don't want to," Elias nodded. "We just need to figure out how to help you next." Lyra took a breath. "I don't know what help looks like anymore." Elias pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "Then we'll start small." He leaned forward slightly, not pushing, just present. "You said your in-laws left you. That tells me there's some kind of official situation behind this. Marriage, politics, something bigger than just a family fight." Lyra hesitated, then she nodded. "My species joined the conquered about 15 cycles ago," she said. "We were not strong enough to stand alone. Humans helped negotiate our entry. That made them valuable partners." Elias glanced at Mara, then back at Lyra. "So you married into a political deal?" "Yes," Lyra said quietly. "I did not mind at first. My husband was kind, or he tried to be, but his family saw me as a bridge, not a person." Jace looked up from his drawing. "What's a bridge?" Mara smiled at him. "Something that helps you get from one place to another." Lyra nodded. "That's what I was to them." Elias exhaled slowly. "And when the bridge wasn't useful anymore, they decided to remove it." Lyra's fingers tightened around her cup. "They said the Alliance no longer needed my presence, that my people and humans had enough agreements in place." Mara's jaw set. "So they just dropped you in the snow." "They would say they gave me freedom," Lyra replied. "They did not break any conquered laws. They simply arranged things." Elias shook his head. "That's a pretty cold kind of clean." Lyra gave a small, sad smile. "Cold seems to be their style." There was a knock at the door. All three adults turned. Elias stood and moved to the door, hand resting on the handle. He opened it carefully. A man stood outside, wrapped in a heavy coat and hat. Snow clung to his shoulders. He looked like the land itself had decided to walk up and knock. "Morning, Eli," the man said. "Saw your fence line lights on last night. Thought you might have had trouble." "Found someone instead," Elias replied, stepping aside. The man stepped in and stamped snow off his boots. His eyes fell on Lyra. He froze for half a second, then nodded politely. "Well," he said, "that's new." "This is Tom," Elias said. "Neighbor Tom, this is Lyra." Tom took off his hat. "Nice to meet you, Lyra." Lyra inclined her head the way she had been taught. "Nice to meet you, Tom." Tom looked between her and Elias. "You need help?" Elias nodded. "Probably. She's got no comm, no ID, and a political mess behind her." Tom whistled softly. "That's more than a loose fence post." Mara poured him a cup of tea and handed it over. "We're starting with warm drinks and calm heads." Tom took the cup. "Good plan." They sat together, 4 humans and 1 alien woman who felt more human than she ever had before. They talked through options. The nearest official station was 2 days away by ground, longer in a storm. Elias had a working long-range transmitter, but it was old and slow. Tom knew a trade pilot who might be passing through the area in a few days. Lyra listened, trying to follow the details. She realized something strange. They were planning her future, not as a problem to solve, not as an item to return, but as a person who needed a path forward. At one point, Jay slid his drawing across the table toward her. "I made you a horse," he said. The drawing was messy and wonderful. 4 long legs, a big head, and a person sitting on top, waving. Lyra smiled. "It's perfect." Jace beamed. Later, Elias took Lyra outside to show her the ranch. The storm had eased enough that the world was visible again. The snow fields stretched out in soft waves, broken by dark lines of fencing and the shapes of distant animals moving slowly. Marigold stood near the stable, chewing on hay like nothing in the universe had ever been wrong. Elias walked beside Lyra, hands in his pockets. "You don't have to stay here, you know," he said. Once we get a signal out, once we get your status sorted, you can go wherever you want. Lyra stopped walking. She looked at the house, at the thin trail of smoke rising from the roof, at Jace's face in the window. I don't know where I want to go, she admitted. Elias nodded. That's all right, too. They stood in silence for a moment. Lyra spoke again. Back home, everything was decided before I ever entered a room. My role, my value, my future. Here it feels like nothing is decided. Elias smiled faintly. Out here, the land decides some things. Weather decides some things, but most of the rest, that's up to us. They walked to the fence line where he had found her. Lyra placed her hand on the same wooden post. The memory of leaning against it, cold and alone, felt distant now, like it had happened to someone else. You didn't have to stop, she said. Elias shrugged. I did. Lyra studied his face. In my culture, that would make you unusual. Elias laughed softly. In mine, it just makes me someone who didn't feel like riding past. A few hours later, the transmitter crackled to life. Elias adjusted the controls, brow furrowed. Come on, old thing. A voice answered, broken but real. A station operator, surprised to hear a call from a small ranch so far out. Elias explained the situation carefully. Lyra listened, heart beating faster. Her name was spoken over official channels. Her status was being recorded. She was no longer invisible. The operator promised to relay the message up the chain. It might take time, but someone would respond. When the call ended, the room felt quieter, heavier with waiting. Mara set more tea on the table. We'll hear back. In the meantime, you're here. Lyra nodded. Thank you. That night, they ate together again. Tom returned home before dark, promising to check in the next day. Jay showed Lyra how to play a simple card game with worn edges and faded numbers. Lyra lost every round and did not care. Before bed, Mara handed her clean clothes. They're not fancy, she said. Lyra smiled. I don't think I need fancy anymore. She lay in the small room again, wrapped in warmth and quiet. Her thoughts drifted to her husband. She wondered if he knew what had been done, if he cared. The thought hurt, but it did not crush her like it used to. She thought instead of Elias' steady voice in the storm. Of Mara's hands guiding her inside. Of Jace's drawing. Somewhere far away, powerful people sat in bright rooms and spoke about alliances and value and usefulness. Here, on a frozen world with wooden beams and stubborn fences, people spoke about soup and storms and who needed help next. Lyra turned on her side and closed her eyes. For the first time in a long while, she did not feel like a bridge between two worlds. She felt like she was standing on solid ground, even if it was covered in snow. The reply from the conquered did not come with flashing lights or dramatic signals. It arrived as a quiet tone from the old transmitter in Elias' workshop, a soft beep that almost went unnoticed under the sound of wind brushing against the walls. Elias heard it first. He set down the tool in his hand and leaned toward the device. That's not static, he muttered. Lyra was in the main room with Mara and Jace helping cut vegetables for lunch. When Elias called her name, her hands froze in place. Lyra, you should hear this. She wiped her hands on a cloth and walked to the workshop. The room smelled like metal, oil, and old wood. The transmitter sat on a shelf, its small screen glowing with a line of text. Incoming relay, priority tag. Elias pressed the button. A voice filled the room, clearer than last time. Official. Citizen Lyra Kesserin. This is Concord Mediation Office, Outer Systems Branch. Your signal has been received. Your status is currently under review. Remain at your present location if it is safe to do so. A delegation has been dispatched to verify circumstances and ensure compliance with interspecies agreement protocols. The message ended with a soft tone. Lyra stared at the transmitter. A delegation? Elias repeated. That sounds formal. Lyra nodded slowly. It means they are sending representatives, possibly from my husband's family, possibly from the Concord Council. Mara appeared in the doorway. That doesn't sound small. It isn't, Lyra said. Her chest felt tight. They don't send delegations for mistakes. They send them for problems. Elias crossed his arms. Well, they're coming to the right place. We've got the problem right here. Lyra gave a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The next 2 days passed in a strange quiet. Life on the ranch continued. Animals needed feeding. Fence lines needed checking. Jace needed help with his lessons. Meals needed cooking. Snow needed clearing. But underneath everything, there was a waiting feeling like the air before a storm. Lyra helped where she could. She learned how to carry feed without spilling it. She learned how to brush Marigold's coat slow and steady until the horse leaned into it like a living wall. She learned how to knead dough, though her hands were clumsy at first. Myra never corrected her harshly. She just showed her again. At night, Lyra lay awake, staring at the ceiling beam. She thought about the delegation. She imagined smooth faces and careful words. She imagined questions that sounded polite but felt like traps. She imagined being asked again to explain why she existed in the wrong place. On the third morning, Tom arrived early, breath puffing in the cold air as he knocked on the door. "Got something on my scanner," he said when Elias opened. "Small shuttle, Concord make. Coming in from high orbit." Lyra's heart jumped into her throat. "They're here," Elias said. The ranch felt smaller suddenly. They did not hide. Elias did not tell Lyra to stay inside. Instead, they stood together near the fence line, where the land opened up into a wide, flat stretch of snow. The sky was pale blue, thin clouds drifting like torn cloth. A dark shape appeared above the horizon. It grew larger, smoother, until the shuttle glided down and settled onto the snow without sound. The hatch opened. 3 figures stepped out. 2 were human, dressed in Concord uniforms, simple and clean. The third was taller, with a narrow frame and silver-blue skin that caught the light. Her eyes were dark and bright at the same time. Lyra recognized her. Sira Valcorin, her husband's older sister. Sira's gaze locked onto Lyra the moment she stepped forward. "Lyra," she said. Her voice carried easily across the cold air. "You look different." Lyra straightened. "Sira." The 2 human officials approached more slowly. One of them raised a small device recording. "I am Mediator Harlan Reed," he said. "This is my associate Tamsin Cho. We are here to assess the situation and ensure that all parties are being treated according to Concord law." Elias stepped forward. "You can start by saying hello like people, not like forms." Harlan blinked, surprised. Then he nodded. "Fair enough, hello." Sira's eyes flicked to Elias. "And you are?" "Elias Holt," he said. "This is my land, my fence, my home." Sira's mouth curved slightly. "So you are the one who found her?" "I'm the one who didn't ride past," Elias replied. There was a brief silence. Mara came to stand beside Elias, Jace half hidden behind her coat. Tom stayed a little back, hands in his pockets, watching. Harlan cleared his throat. "Let's keep this calm. We're here to listen." Sira turned fully to Lyra. "You were meant to be delivered to a transit station." "That was the arrangement." Lyra held her gaze. "I was left in a storm with no comm unit, no map, and no shelter." Sira tilted her head. "You had clothing, you had directions." "To a road I couldn't see," Lyra said. Her voice shook, but she did not stop. "On a world I had never walked before." Tamsin tapped something into her device. Sira's eyes narrowed slightly. "You are alive, you were found, the system worked." Elias made a low sound in his throat. "That's a cold way to talk about a person." Sira looked at him. "This is not your matter." "It became my matter when she nearly froze next to my fence," Elias said. "Out here, if you see someone in trouble, you don't ask what contract they're part of, you help." Harlan raised a hand. "Let's stay focused." "Lyra, do you feel you were intentionally placed in danger?" Lyra swallowed. This was the question, the one that would shape everything. She thought of the thin cloak, the missing comm unit, the shuttle lifting away. "Yes," she said quietly. "I do." Sira's expression hardened. "You're making an accusation against my family." Lyra lifted her chin. "I am telling the truth." The wind brushed across the snow, carrying the sound of the animals in the distance, a low, steady presence. Mara spoke for the first time. "We found her shaking, numb, barely able to walk. That's what we saw. You can write that down." Tamsin nodded and typed. Harlan turned to Sira. "We will need to review the escort logs and shuttle records." Sira's eyes flicked away for half a second. It was small, but Lyra saw it. "This is unnecessary," Sira said. "Lyra's presence in our family was no longer required. We followed legal procedure." Elias frowned. "You talk about her like she's equipment." Sira looked at him, really looked this time. "You don't understand our ways." Elias shrugged. "Maybe not, but I understand cold, and I understand what happens when you leave someone alone in it." There was a pause. Jace tugged on Mara's coat. "Is she going to take Lyra away?" he whispered, not quietly enough. Sira's eyes dropped to the child. Something in her expression shifted just a little. Harlan sighed. "No one is being taken away today. We're here to gather information." Lyra stepped forward. Her legs felt steady. "I don't want to go back." Sira looked at her, surprised. "You don't have a choice." "I do," Lyra said. "I am a citizen of the Concord, not a possession of your house." Harlan nodded slowly. She's correct. Legally, she cannot be forced to return to a private residence. Sierra's jaw tightened. This will have consequences, Lyra nodded. I know. Elias glanced at her, then back at Sierra. She's got a place here for now. Sierra studied the ranch, the fences, the animals, the simple house. You would keep her, she asked. On this world with these people? Lyra answered before Elias could. I would choose this world. I would choose these people. Sierra looked at her for a long moment, then she turned to Harlan. We will provide our records. The mediator nodded. Thank you. The delegation stayed for hours. They scanned the area. They reviewed Elias' transmitter logs. They took statements from Mara, Tom, and even Jace, who proudly told them about drawing a horse for Lyra. Sierra stayed mostly silent, watching. At one point, she walked with Lyra along the fence line. You've changed, Sierra said. Lyra nodded. I had to. Sierra looked out at the snow fields. Our family believes strength is control. You seem to believe it's something else now. Lyra thought of Elias' hand steady at her back in the storm, of Mara's warm kitchen, of Jace's drawing. I believe it's choosing not to leave, she said. Sierra did not reply. By the time the sun dipped low, the delegation gathered near their shuttle. Harlan spoke to everyone. We will file a formal report. Until a decision is made, Lyra Kesserin is under Concord protection and may remain here by choice. Elias let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Sierra stepped toward Lyra one last time. If you stay, you will not be part of our house again. Lyra met her gaze. I know. Sierra nodded once, sharp and final. Then she turned and walked back to the shuttle. The engines hummed. Snow lifted into the air. The shuttle rose and vanished into the sky. The land felt bigger when it was gone. Mara exhaled. Well, that was a day. Elias laughed softly. Yeah, I was hoping for a quiet one. Tom clapped him on the shoulder. You don't live quiet, Eli, you live right. Jace ran up to Lyra and hugged her around the waist. It was sudden and fierce and unplanned. You didn't leave, he said. Lyra's eyes stung. She wrapped her arms around him carefully. No, she said, I didn't. That night the ranch felt warmer than usual. They ate together, talking about small things again. A broken hinge, a new calf expected in the spring, a card game Jace wanted to teach Lyra. Lyra listened, smiling, feeling something settle inside her. Far away, powerful people would read reports and argue about responsibility and law. Here, in a simple house on a frozen world, people had decided something much smaller and much bigger at the same time. They had decided that Lyra belonged, not because of agreements or value or use, but because she had been there, thought for 4 seconds the days after the delegation left felt strange, like the ranch was holding its breath. Snow still covered everything, bright in sunlight and dull under clouds. The animals still needed care. Meals still had to be cooked. Fence lines still had to be checked before the next storm rolled in. But now there was a new idea sitting in every corner of the house. The galaxy had looked at this small ranch. Not fully, not yet, but enough to make Lyra feel like she was standing under a spotlight she never asked for. Elias tried to keep things normal. That was his way. If something big happened, he fixed what needed fixing and then went right back to work. He repaired a gate hinge, tightened a wire line, and checked the generator like it was any other week. Mara did the same. She washed clothes, taught Jace his lessons, and made sure Lyra ate enough. She did not speak about fear, but Lyra saw it in the way Mara checked the window more often than usual. Lyra helped with everything. She carried water, chopped wood, and learned to patch small tears in work gloves. She listened more than she spoke. But at night, when the house grew quiet, her thoughts became loud again. She wondered what the Concord report would say. She wondered what Sierra would tell the family council. She wondered if her husband had even heard the news yet, or if he had accepted her disappearance as easily as he had accepted her silence. One evening, as Lyra and Mara cleaned the table, Elias came in from the workshop with a look that meant the quiet was about to end. The transmitter's got another incoming, he said. Lyra's hands froze over the dishcloth. Elias held up a small paper strip from the printer. It's a schedule request, not an order, a request. Mara wiped her hands and walked closer. From who? Elias read it again like he wanted to be sure he hadn't misunderstood. Concord Mediation Office. They want to bring observers and not just humans. They're calling it a community verification visit. Tom, who had stopped by for supplies, raised his eyebrows. That sounds like they want to come look around. Elias nodded. Yeah, and they want to come here. Lyra felt her stomach twist. They want to see if I'm safe. Mara's voice was calm but firm. She is safe. Tom let out a low whistle. Safe isn't the only thing they'll measure. Elias rubbed the back of his neck. They'll measure everything they can, that's what officials do. Lyra looked down at the wooden floor. If they decide I'm a problem, they might remove me anyway. Elias stepped closer. His voice softened. Hey, we're not letting anyone treat you like cargo again. That's easy to say, Tom murmured, and harder to do when paperwork and politics show up. Elias shot him a look. Helpful, Tom held up his hands. I'm just saying, if they're bringing observers, they're going to judge with their eyes, so maybe we give them something worth seeing. Mara nodded slowly. Not an act, not a show, just the truth. Lyra swallowed. What truth? Mara met her eyes. That you're not alone here. 2 days later, the ranch was busy in a way it rarely was. Neighbors arrived in small ground vehicles and on hardy riding animals. Some came with supplies, some came with food, and some came with nothing but their presence. They didn't speak loudly about it, but everyone understood why they were coming. If the conquered wanted to see the community, then the community would be there. Tom brought extra fuel cells and a case of fresh medical packs. An older woman named Rena brought jars of preserved fruit and a warm quilt she insisted Lyra should have. A quiet man named Vance checked Elias' roof seals without being asked. 2 teenage sisters helped Mara scrub the mudroom until it looked as clean as a station hallway. Jace thought it was the best week of his life. He ran from person to person like a small comet, telling everyone they were going to have space visitors and that Lyra was basically famous now. Lyra tried to help, but she felt like she was floating. Like the ranch was suddenly a stage and she did not know her lines. Elias caught her standing still near the window and gently bumped her shoulder with his. You all right? I don't know, Lyra admitted. I'm afraid I'll say the wrong thing. Elias snorted. Out here, wrong thing is leaving the gate open. Everything else can be fixed. Lyra looked at him. What if they ask about my family, about the marriage? Elias' eyes stayed steady. Then you tell the truth, simple truth. You don't owe anyone fancy wording. Lyra nodded, even though her throat felt tight. On the morning of the visit, the sky was clear but cold. The snow sparkled like broken glass scattered across the land. Fence lines shone in thin, dark strokes. Smoke rose from ranch chimneys in calm, straight lines. A shuttle came down just after midday. This time it was larger than the first one. It landed with careful control, like it was trying not to disturb anything. The hatch opened and several figures stepped out. Harlan Reed was there again, his uniform neat, his expression serious. Tamsin Cho followed with her tablet and recording tools. Behind them came 2 more humans in different uniforms, security but not aggressive, more like cautious. And then came 3 aliens. One was Sierra Valcorin again, her silver blue skin bright against the snow. Another alien stood beside her, older, with darker markings along the jaw and neck, posture stiff and proud. The third was shorter and carried a case of instruments, eyes scanning everything quickly. Lyra's heart pounded. The older alien's face was unfamiliar, but the shape of authority was easy to recognize. Sierra's gaze slid across the gathered humans near the ranch house. She paused when she saw how many there were. Harlan stepped forward first. Thank you for receiving us. This visit is part of the Concord Review. We will observe, ask questions, and confirm living conditions. Elias nodded. You're welcome to look. Just remember this is a home, not a courtroom. The older alien looked at Elias. You speak to officials as if you are equal. Elias shrugged. I speak to people. Sierra watched that exchange closely, like she was filing it away in her mind. Harlan cleared his throat again. Citizen Kesserin, are you here by choice? Lyra stepped forward. She could feel eyes on her from every direction, humans, aliens, officials, neighbors. She could feel the cold air fill her lungs. Yes, she said, I am here by choice. The older alien's gaze sharpened. And you refuse return to House Valcorin. Lyra held her chin high. Yes. Sierra did not react, but Lyra saw her fingers tighten slightly at her side. Tamsin began recording. We will proceed. They walked toward the ranch house. Inside, the visitors removed outer layers. The aliens did so with precise motions, their clothing fitted and clean, very different from the worn coats and boots of the ranchers. Lyra could almost feel the contrast in the air. Mara offered warm drinks as she offered them to everyone. She handed a mug to the older alien with the same calm politeness she gave Harlan. The older alien looked down at the mug like it was an unfamiliar object. What is this? Tea, Mara said. Sweetened. It helps with the cold. The alien hesitated, then took a careful sip. His eyes widened a fraction, as if he had not expected comfort to taste like anything. Jace stared from behind Elias' leg. The shorter alien with the instrument case noticed him and tilted its head. "You are the offspring?" it asked, voice sharp but not unkind. Jace puffed up. "I'm Jace," the alien blinked. "You speak directly," Jace frowned. "How else would I speak?" Mara hid a smile behind her mug. The observers spent the first hour walking through the ranch house and the outbuildings. Elias showed them the generator, the heating system, the water purification unit, and the small medical scanner Tom had donated. Harlan asked about income, food storage, emergency plans, communication range. Elias answered plainly, sometimes with humor, sometimes with blunt honesty. Tamsin typed constantly. The older alien, who introduced himself as Counselor Vayar Valcorin, studied everything with a careful, almost cold focus. He asked questions that sounded like measurements. How many days of food do you store? How many personnel are trained in emergency response? What formal agreements exist between this human settlement and conquered security? Elias answered each one. We store enough for winter. We train each other. Our agreement is we don't let people die if we can stop it. Vayar's expression did not soften. That is not an agreement, that is a feeling. Elias met his eyes. It's a choice. Vayar made a quiet sound, like he didn't know what to do with that. Outside, Myra showed them the stable and the small herd shelter. She explained how animals were kept safe in storms, how neighbors shared labor when someone was sick, how supplies were traded and repaired instead of wasted. The shorter alien, who introduced itself as Analyst Coro, watched the herd animals with clear curiosity. These are not optimized, Coro said. Tom, standing nearby, chuckled. They're alive, that's the optimization. Coro tilted its head. You accept inefficiency. Mara answered calmly. We accept reality. They moved back inside to the main room, where chairs had been pulled into a loose circle. Harlan sat with a neutral face, like he was trying to be fair. Tamsin sat beside him, ready to record. Sira sat straight, hands folded, watching Lyra closely. Vayar sat like a statue, still and formal. Elias sat beside Mara. Tom sat with two other ranchers. Rena sat near the heater, hands folded over her knees. Lyra sat opposite the Valcorin family, her palms slightly damp despite the warmth. Harlan began, We will ask questions. Lyra, you may answer as you wish. You are not under arrest or detention. This is a mediation process. Lyra nodded. Vayar spoke first. Why did you choose to remain here? Lyra's mouth went dry. She looked around at the humans. Elias gave her a small nod. Mara's eyes were steady. Lyra took a breath. Because they saw me, she said. Not as an asset, not as a symbol, as a person. Vayar's eyes narrowed. You were a symbol, that is your function in a political marriage. Lyra's voice stayed calm even as her chest burned. That was their belief, not mine. Sira spoke, her voice smooth. You were protected, you lived in comfort, you had resources. Lyra turned to her. I was managed, I was quiet, I was expected to disappear when the Alliance no longer needed my face. Sira's jaw tightened. You are accusing, Lyra nodded. Yes. Harlan raised a hand gently. Sira, you may respond, but let her speak. Lyra continued. When I was left in the storm, Elias stopped. He didn't ask what my title was. He didn't ask what my value was. He saw a person freezing and he stopped. Vayar's voice was sharp. He stopped because you are rare, because you are unusual, because you were interesting. Elias leaned forward. No, he said simply. I stopped because leaving her would have been wrong. Vayar stared at him. Wrong according to what code? Elias didn't hesitate. According to me? The room went quiet. That simple answer seemed to unsettle Vayar more than any accusation. It was not a legal phrase. It was not a formal rule. It was a personal choice spoken out loud without shame. Analyst Coro looked between them. Human ethical decisions are decentralized, Tom smiled. Yeah, that's a fancy way to say we don't wait for permission to be decent. Sira's eyes flickered, but she said nothing. Harlan asked the next question. Lyra, have you been pressured to stay here? Has anyone threatened you, controlled your communication, or restricted your movement? Lyra shook her head. No, they told me I could leave. They offered me tools to contact the conquered. They let me rest. They gave me work if I wanted it. They treated me like I mattered before they knew my story. Vayar's gaze sharpened. They gained attention by sheltering you. Mara spoke, voice level. We gained a tired woman who needed help. We gained extra laundry and an extra plate at dinner. If we wanted attention, we'd have invited the whole planet. A few neighbors chuckled softly. Sira looked at Mara, then at Lyra. You speak as if this is simple. Mara nodded. It is simple, not easy, simple. Vayar leaned forward slightly. In our society, generosity is measured. It must have purpose. It must be earned. Rena, the older neighbor woman, cleared her throat. She rarely spoke in groups, but when she did, people listened. Out here, Rena said, storms don't care what you earned. If you fall, you fall. So we don't ask if someone deserves help. We help because next time it might be us. Vayar looked at her, confused. You admit it is self-interest. Rena smiled, gentle as warm bread. No, I admit it's understanding. Analyst Coro tapped at its device. Human communities in hostile environments exhibit cooperative behavior beyond contractual obligation. Tom grinned. You can write that down too. Sierra's eyes stayed on Lyra as if searching for something. Finally, she spoke again, quieter than before. You left our house, Sierra said. Do you know what people will say about you? Lyra answered honestly. They will say I failed. They will say I embarrassed you. They will say I was weak. Sierra's voice sharpened. And you accept that? Lyra looked around the circle. She saw Elia's rough hands, Mara's tired eyes, Jace's curious face, the neighbors who had come without being asked. She turned back to Sierra. Yes, she said, because here weakness is not punished with abandonment. Here weakness is met with support until it becomes strength. For the first time, Sierra's expression changed in a way Lyra had never seen before. It was not softness, it was not warmth, but it was uncertainty. Vayar sat back, silent for a moment, as if he had run into a wall he did not expect. Harlan closed his tablet slowly. Thank you, he said. This has been clear. The visit continued into late afternoon. The observers watched a simple ranch task, Elias and Tom repairing a fence post loosened by ice. Mara and Rena cooked a meal while explaining food storage and rationing. Jace proudly showed analyst Coro his drawings, including a messy picture of an alien drinking tea. Coro stared at it for a long moment, then carefully folded the paper and placed it in its case, as if it was valuable data. When the sun began to sink, the visitors gathered near the door. Harlan spoke to Elias. You've been cooperative, that matters. Elias nodded. We're not trying to fight the conquered, we're trying to keep someone safe. Harlan looked at Lyra. We will submit our findings. Until then, your protection status remains active. No one may remove you from here against your will. Lyra breathed out, slow. Vayar stepped toward her. His voice was controlled, but it carried weight. House Valcorin will not forget this. Lyra met his eyes. Neither will I. Sierra stood beside Vayar, looking at Lyra like she was seeing her for the first time. You seem steadier, Sierra said quietly. Lyra didn't smile, but her voice was calm. Because I am not standing alone. Sierra's gaze shifted to Elias, then Mara, then the neighbors. For a moment she looked almost troubled. Then she nodded once, small and sharp, and turned away. The shuttle lifted into the sky and disappeared again, leaving only wind and silence behind. Inside the house, everyone exhaled like they had been holding their breath for hours. Tom rubbed his hands together. Well, that was something. Mara poured fresh tea. We did what we could. Elias looked at Lyra. How you doing? Lyra sat down slowly, feeling the warmth of the room, the steady presence of people around her. I think, she said, choosing her words carefully, they came to measure power, and they found something they don't know how to measure. Elias smiled faintly. Yeah, Lyra nodded. Her eyes stung again, but she did not look away. They found a kind of strength that doesn't need permission, she said. A kind of strength that stops in a storm. Outside, the frozen world stretched wide and quiet, but Lyra no longer saw it as empty. The official decision did not arrive quickly. That was the first thing Lyra learned about the conquered in a new way. On stations and council halls, everything sounded fast. People spoke of schedules, deadlines, and urgency. But out on the frontier, far from polished rooms, decisions moved like winter rivers, slow, careful, and sometimes blocked by ice. Weeks passed. The storms came and went. Some were gentle, dropping soft snow like feathers. Some were harsh, pressing hard against the ranch house and rattling the shutters like nervous hands. Life on Kestrel Ridge stayed the same in many ways, but it also changed in ways Lyra could not ignore. She became part of the daily rhythm. She learned the names of the herd animals, not because they were important to trade or politics, but because Jace named some of them and insisted that names mattered. She learned how to patch a tear in a saddle strap, how to check a battery cell for damage, and how to keep her balance while carrying a bucket across icy ground. She learned that humans did not only survive through toughness, they survived through small habits of care. Elias checked the fence line every morning even when the sky looked calm, because calm could change. Mara warmed water before anyone asked, because cold hands made slow work. Tom stopped by every few days with news and spare parts, because distance did not break community out here. Rena left jars of preserved fruit on the doorstep without knocking, because giving did not require an audience. At first, Lyra kept waiting for someone to ask what she would give back, not in a cruel way, but in the expected way. In her old world, kindness came with hidden strings. Even gifts were a kind of debt, but the Holts never spoke of debt. They spoke of help and sharing and getting through winter. One evening, Elias sat at the table with the transmitter open, tools spread around it like small metal bones. Lyra sat nearby, watching. "This thing's older than I am," he said, tapping the casing. "But it still works, mostly." Lyra leaned in. "Why do you keep fixing old things instead of replacing them?" Elias shrugged. "Out here we replace when we have to. Fixing keeps us alive longer." Lyra thought about it. "You treat objects like people." Elias laughed. "Nah. I treat people better." Lyra smiled, and the smile stayed longer than she expected. Then one morning the decision finally came. The transmitter beeped twice, louder than usual. Elias was outside, breaking ice near the water line. Mara was kneading dough. Lyra heard the beep and froze. For a moment she did not want to touch the machine, because a message could change everything. But she forced herself to walk to the workshop and press the receive button. Harlan Reed's voice came through, steady and formal, but softer than before, like he had learned something during his visits. "Citizen Lyra Kesserin, this is Mediator Harlan Reed, Outer Systems Branch. The Concord has completed its review. Findings confirm that your departure from House Valcorin was not conducted with adequate safety measures. House Valcorin is under formal censure and required to submit to compliance review." Lyra's breath caught. The message continued. "Your citizen status remains in full standing. You are granted permanent protection under the Concord's Personal Autonomy Charter. You may reside where you choose. No private house may claim authority over you. You may pursue restitution through civil channels if desired. Additionally, the Concord acknowledges the Holt Ranch and surrounding settlement network for exemplary humanitarian conduct." The message ended with a final tone, then silence. Lyra stood still, hand on the transmitter. Permanent protection. No one could drag her back. No one could erase her quietly. She did not realize she was shaking until Mara stepped into the workshop and placed a hand on her shoulder. "What did it say?" Mara asked softly. Lyra swallowed and tried to speak. Her voice came out thin at first. They ruled in my favor." Mara's eyes closed for a moment, relief washing through her face like warmth. "Good." Elias came in seconds later, stomping snow off his boots. "I heard the beep. What's going on?" Lyra looked at him. She could not find fancy words. She only had the truth. "I'm free," she said. Elias blinked, then smiled like the sun had come out. "Well, that's the best news we've had all winter." Jace burst into the room behind him, eyes wide. "Are we celebrating?" Mara laughed. "Yes, we are." That day, the ranch felt lighter. Neighbors came by when the news spread. Not because they wanted credit, but because they had worried quietly for weeks. Tom slapped Elias on the back hard enough to make him grunt. Rena hugged Lyra without asking, a tight, warm hug that smelled like flour and smoke. Analyst Caro even sent a short data message through the Concord network, a rare thing. It simply said, "Observed human cooperative resilience. Recommend study. Also T acceptable." Elias stared at the text for a long moment. "Is that a compliment?" Tom grinned. "It's practically poetry." Lyra laughed, and this time the laugh felt easy. But the decision did not end the story. It began the next part of it, because news traveled. Within days, a few small ships began to pass closer to Kestrel Ridge, not landing, just drifting nearby to look. Some belonged to traders, some belonged to researchers, some belonged to curious Concord officials who had heard rumors. The story that spread was not written like a legal report. It was told like a legend. An alien bride left to freeze, a human rancher who stopped his horse. A frontier community that stood up to a powerful house without weapons, without threats, without shouting. They simply said no. They simply protected someone. In the wider galaxy, many species spoke about humans as clever, ambitious, and sometimes reckless. Some feared human ships because humans expanded fast. Some admired human technology because humans adapted quickly. But now there was another image traveling through the stars. Humans as the ones who stop. the ones who see a person in trouble and treat it as their problem. That kind of reputation moved differently than fear. It spread quietly and it stayed. A week after the decision, Sira Valcorin returned alone. No delegation, no shuttle full of officials, just one small craft landing on the snow with careful control. Lyra saw it from the window and felt her stomach tighten. Myra noticed immediately and stood beside her. "You don't have to talk to her," Myra said. "I know," Lyra replied, "but I want to." Elias stepped outside with Lyra. The air was cold but calm, the sky pale and wide. Marigold stood nearby, ears forward, watching the craft like she understood tension. Sira stepped out alone. She wore a heavy coat this time, not the sleek formal clothing from before. It made her look less like a symbol and more like a traveler. She approached slowly, hands visible, posture controlled. "I received the ruling," she said. Lyra nodded. "So did I." Sira's eyes flicked to Elias, then back to Lyra. "House Valcorin will comply." "That's good," Lyra said simply. Sira hesitated. Her face looked different in the open air, away from polished halls. The cold put a sharp edge on her features. The wind lifted a strand of her hair and made her blink. "I came," Sira said, "because I need to understand something." Elias crossed his arms but said nothing. Sira spoke to Lyra. "Why did you stay?" Lyra stared at her for a long moment. She could have answered with anger. She could have listed every hurt and every betrayal. She could have made Sira feel small. But that was the old game, the one she was stepping away from. "I stayed," Lyra said, "because they treated me like my life mattered even when they knew nothing about me." Sira's gaze sharpened. "That cannot be true." "It is," Lyra said. "They did not ask what they would gain. They did not ask what they would lose. They simply helped." Sira looked past Lyra toward the ranch house, where smoke rose from the chimney, where a dog barked, where Jace pressed his face to the window to watch. "I don't understand," Sira admitted, and the words sounded strange coming from her like a crack in stone. Elias finally spoke. "It's not a math problem," he said. "It's a choice." Sira's eyes narrowed slightly. "A choice made without calculation is dangerous." Elias shrugged. "So is leaving someone to freeze." Sira flinched, not like she had been struck, but like a truth had been placed too close to her. She turned back to Lyra. "Our culture measures strength by control. We believed giving you freedom meant releasing responsibility." Lyra nodded slowly. "That is what you believed." Sira's voice softened just a fraction. "And you believe responsibility is shared." "Yes," Lyra said, "because storms don't care about status and pain doesn't care about rank." Sira stared at her silent. Then she did something unexpected. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small object, an official data chip in a sealed case. "This contains your personal items," she said. "Your comm unit, your identity papers, your marriage documents, everything that was held in our house." Lyra's breath caught. Sira held it out. Lyra stepped forward and took it carefully. The case felt cold through her glove, but the weight of it felt like closure. "Thank you," Lyra said. Sira nodded once. "I did not come to apologize." Lyra didn't expect her to. "I know." Sira's eyes flickered again, uncertain. "But I came to return what was yours." "And to see the place that changed you." Lyra looked at the ranch. "It didn't change me," she said. "It reminded me." Sira's gaze moved to Elias. "You will be watched. Humans always are. Now you will be watched for different reasons." Elias sighed. "Great." Sira almost smiled. "Almost, your kind does not understand what it does to others." Elias frowned. "We understand more than you think." Sira turned to Lyra one last time. "Will you ever return to the conquered Central?" "Maybe," Lyra said, "but not as someone's bridge, not as someone's tool." Sira nodded. "Then you truly are free." She walked back toward her craft. Before she entered, she paused and looked back over her shoulder. Her voice was quiet, almost lost in the wind. "You were left," she said, "and you were chosen by strangers. That story will not die." Then she stepped inside. The craft lifted gently and vanished into the sky. Lyra stood in the snow, holding the data case against her chest. Elias shifted beside her. "You okay?" Lyra breathed in the cold air. It no longer felt like an enemy. It felt like the world she lived in. "I am," she said, "more than okay." The next month brought a new season, not of warmth, but of change. A small Concord relay beacon was installed near the ranch, officially funded to improve emergency communication for frontier settlements. The Concord called it infrastructure support. The ranchers called it finally. A medical shuttle began passing through the region once a week, offering supplies and check-ins. Not because the Concord suddenly became generous, but because the Concord had seen something it could not ignore. Humans had created a standard without writing a law, and other species noticed. One day, while Elias and Lyra rode along the fence line together, a trader craft passed overhead and dipped its wings in a friendly gesture. Elias looked up, squinting. "They're saluting," he said. Lyra smiled as the wind tugged at her scarf. "They're acknowledging." Elias glanced at her. "You still want to stay?" Lyra looked across the snow fields. The fences cut clean lines through the white. Distant lights marked other ranches. Smoke rose from chimneys. A herd moved slowly, calm and alive. She saw the place where she had once leaned against a fence post, shaking and numb, waiting for the cold to win. She remembered how close the end had been, and she remembered the sound of hooves, the human voice, the stop. "Yes," she said, "I want to stay." Elias nodded. "Then you're staying." They rode on, Marigold's hooves steady on packed snow, the fence line guiding them like a promise. Far out in the galaxy, people would keep telling the story. They would tell it in trade ports and council halls, in ship mess rooms and quiet homes. They would say humanity was strange. Humanity was stubborn. Humanity was dangerous. But now they would also say something else, spoken with a kind of respect that did not come from fear. Humanity was the species that stops, even in the coldest places.